Welcome to the Mad About Wayne podcast from the Wayne County Historical Society in Wayne County, Georgia. We hope this time together is informative, educational, and maybe even a little entertaining. Mad About Wayne is brought to you by ProSonics Audio Engineering. Now, let's get into today's Mad About Wayne podcast.
Welcome back. We're here again for our America 250 series, Mad About Wayne podcast. Tonight we're doing train history and Women's History Month. And we have with us Melba Bennett Murphy, who is a specialist in both those topics. Don't you find that to be true?
Absolutely.
And we have Courtney Gibbs Tyre, who will go down in history as the living specialist of the history of her great-great-grandmother. How many greats did Mother Whaley have for you, ma'am?
I think Porter's 7th generation, so I'm 6th. So she's what, great-great-great-grandmother.
But she's such a person of significance that we call her name often, and we revere her memory.
Yes.
So we're going to start the first part of the podcast with trains, the city that trains built, and how we got to be here in the first place, the city of Jessup and Wayne County, is because of basically the trains.
Yes.
And we were station number 7. No, I'm sorry,
6.
That's Scriven. I have just moved right on over to hometown there. Station number 6 on the Atlantic and Gulf Railroad, which was developed by the Scriven family, which is why I did the snafu into Scriven. But that was they are the company that built the trestle, the first trestle over the Omaha at Doctortown. In 1857, they built a trestle out of wood, and I still find that very fascinating that they were able to do that. And then the western terminus of the railroad was going to be out toward Pensacola. That's why it was Atlantic and Gulf. And Scriven, the city of Scriven, didn't become Scriven until 1872 with Willis Clary, who also has a connection to Courtney's family. Courtney's just so historical. Aren't you historical, Courtney?
I like to think so. Thank you.
I like to think so, too.
Thank you,
So,
Janet. I do appreciate that, by the way. This is Janet Royal.
Since I taught her everything she knows. But the Scrivens had a problem that a lot of the railroads had, is that they ran out of money before they ran out of rails. And so they were interrupted by the Civil War. It was John Bryan Scriven and James Proctor Scriven, and they were actually citizens of Savannah. And during the smallpox outbreak, one of them became mayor because everybody else left, or yellow fever. It was either smallpox or yellow fever.
I think it was yellow fever.
I think it was yellow fever,
Late
too.
1890s.
I hope it wasn't the pox.
So, anyway, everybody left town but them, and they ran the government. And they went bankrupt because of the Civil War, and it became what they did was kind of like education. If you change the name, you fix it. And so they changed the name to Savannah, Florida and Western, and they morphed into several different kinds of railroads. And then they went bankrupt or reorganized so that they could also receive money from the government. And I did it again. Once before, Mark will like this. I said Robert Plant instead of Henry W. Plant. Robert Plant, as some of you might know, was the lead guitar player.
Yeah.
Yes.
Lead singer for Led Zeppelin.
Yep.
Which is...
Well, he was in the famous video, too, with all the girls with the guitars.
Robert Palmer.
Yes, that's
Robert
different.
Palmer.
Tomato.
Plant had longer
We're
hair.
showing our age. But anyway, Henry Plant, it went to the Plant system. The Plant system went to Atlantic Coastline. Atlantic Coastline had competition with Seaboard Airline, and then they combined. It became Seaboard Coastline, and then it became CSX.
That's a lot of lines.
So we have trains rolling through here since just about the beginning of time. That's why we got to be the name, the city that trains built. Also because of Norfolk Southern and the Macon-Brunswick Railroad, which was in the 1870s, and that involved Willis Clary as well, and it involved a gentleman named James R. Jessup,
Yep.
who was a northern industrialist, which is the polite way that I say
Carpetbagger.
I know.
Carpetbaggers.
We're not being politically correct.
Well, they weren't either.
If the carpet bag fits.
And you know, I've one of the things I don't know if y'all have watched The Gilded Age.
Oh, absolutely.
Love The Gilded Age, and that's what makes me think about Jessup and the time, because they're talking about all the railroad
They're
stuff
building railroads.
and
That
all the
is.
different, and it mentions some of the people that you've mentioned, and they're going broke. And
I think we're going to end up needing to help them write a happier story, but we'll see when they come back. But and Morris K. Jessup,
Yes.
who's also involved in the Gilded Age and
Yes,
also
he is.
involved with railroad, and that's supposed to be one of our namesakes.
right.
But Morris was also a northern industrialist, and he did have a land transaction here with Willis Clary, as a matter of fact, in
Right.
the Jessup Railroads.
Who happened to be Mother Whaley's stepfather.
Mother Whaley's stepfather.
Mm-hmm.
And so Willis Clary convinced Captain Hazelhurst, I think he was a captain, I might have promoted him. He was a part of the Macon and Brunswick Railroad. And Willis Clary convinced them when they were building the Macon and Brunswick to have it cross here at station number 6, which would become Jessup. And my theory, and we've talked about this before, is that that's how Jessup got its name, because Willis
Exactly.
Clary paid for the first city survey.
Right.
And I think as a pledge of allegiance, or whatever you want to call it, he named the town after James R. Jessup.
And isn't it true that at one time Scriven was larger than Jessup, or maybe it was more developed before Jessup had, but the reason that Jessup pulled ahead was because we got the intersection.
And also because Captain Grace would not let them put Rice Yard in Scriven.
Okay.
Captain Grace was the land baron. Captain Christopher Columbus Grace was the land baron. In fact, the Grace estate still has a pretty good holding of land in the area. Captain Grace was he was not a carpetbagger, but he could have been a robber baron. And he would not. If he sold you land, he sold it with the hopes that you wouldn't pay him, so he would take it back and keep your money, what you did pay it.
Oh, okay.
He the Ulmer. There
Sounds
was
like
a
a nice
community
guy.
outside Scriven named Ulmer after Ulmer Aspinwall, and John Aspinwall bought the land from Captain Grace. And when he made his last payment to Captain Grace, he said, "Johnny, if I'd known you were going to pay me, I'd never sold it to you." So that was Captain Grace, and
Could they
so
not
that's
afford
why
the H on his
Scriven
name?
really was kind of landlocked, was because Captain Grace did not turn loose. But he owned property in several counties, and he didn't come to the area until around 1870. But he also had transactions with Willis Clary.
Oh.
But yeah, Rice Yard, the railroad wanted to put Rice Yard, what became Rice Yard in Waycross, wanted to put that in Scriven, and Captain Grace said no. And so Jessup went. That's when they really exploded and got time. So anyway, the train history, the Macon and Brunswick became a part of the East Tennessee, Virginia, and Georgia, ETV&G, and our mother called it Eat Tournaments, Vinegar, and Grits. And that's how I can always remember the initials for East Tennessee, Virginia, and Georgia, because Malvia had a sense of humor. And maybe they all called it that back then. I don't know. But that made the difference in us developing as a town and going from Station 6 to Jessup.
And that's how we got Macon and Brunswick Street.
Go ahead and explain that, ma'am.
Oh, okay. If I can remember correctly.
I'll correct you if you're wrong.
I'm sure you will. So the two streets that run parallel to the railroad, those are, that's Broad. But if you go one block over, one is Brunswick Street, which runs by the courthouse, and Macon Street, which runs by the old city hall, which is now where El Dorado and the Berry Patch and all them are. And that has to do with the fact that we had the Macon and Brunswick line, correct?
Correct.
See,
and
I
the
paid
other
attention.
streets in Jessup are named for trees,
Yes.
or they're named for numbers. First
Right.
Street, Second Street, Third Street.
And the numbers were to show the county part, correct? And
Right.
the tree part was the ones that were considered the city.
So where did the name, other than the obvious, about Broad Street? Because Broad Street was on either side of the railroad.
Broad Street was the avenue for industry, and at the time there were homes also on Broad. So you had the west side of the railroad track, northwest, southwest Broad, and that's where the Clary Whaley house is, city lot number 1.
Which is now Harris CPA company.
That was the business side. And that's where the Merchants and Farmers Bank was. Mm-hmm. And that's where the Cohen department store, Mayor Cohen, we're going to have Mayor Cohen on in April or May. Shelby's going to come and talk about the Cohens. So that, all that stuff with the Whaley store, the Whaley Bank,
Right.
and the Wilkins store, all those were on the west side of the street. And then on the east side of the railroad track, where there's East Broad, and that's where that postcard that shows the Hinckley house, that big fancy house, that's where the Jessup Furniture Outlet warehouse, I don't know what's in there now, but that was had residences. Right. They had a few businesses, the Majette Tractor Company there, the Kicklighter Building, where JJ's Place and Mallard Arms,
Right.
all those, that was there. But basically, that was the residential side. East side was residential, where the churches are.
Right.
And then, First Baptist was originally on Macon Street.
Yeah, it was on the other side.
So anyway, but all those streets were named with a purpose. They were named for numbers. They were named for trees. And then you have Macon and Brunswick. So that just seems to underscore and amplify the fact that Willis Cleary named the town after James R.
And
Jessup.
supposedly I think I was told that he planted those oak trees that go down Cherry Street when you're going towards the churches. There's those
Toward Brunswick?
Yeah, when you're going towards Brunswick and you've got the oak trees that people keep cutting. That the Clarys, or that he and I think they were the ones. If not them, it was the Whaleys that planted those down. That's why me and Mom used to have a fit when they cut them.
Well, I was giving a mini lesson to somebody who didn't ask for it one time, and I was explaining the correlation about Clary and Jessup, and they maybe were a little cynical, and they say, "You suppose that was a bribe? If you'll finance bringing, then we'll name the town for you."
I don't know that I'd call that a bribe.
Well, it's a quid pro
How about
quo.
bait?
Or a gentleman's
We'll
agreement.
bait you up.
Quid
I
pro
like the sound
quo.
of that better than
Right.
bribing. Bribing involves a large volume of cash. Now, he may have had the ego
Oh,
that
I used
worked
to
it.
bribe my kids for, Star Wars toys, so that it could be other things besides
That's
cash.
I
true.
thought
but
she was going to say Starburst there, because I could be
no,
bribed with those.
they
Strawberry
had
ones,
high
But yeah,
demands.
the fact of it is, plain and simple, is the train
Something
made the
happened, and
difference
here
in
it
town.
was, and
Yep.
we are all the better for it.
Absolutely. So we just had this long history. We had the Champion and the Silver Meteor and the Amtrak stop. The train still is important to us. We still have trains that come through on a regular basis. We have the Amtraks, the Silver Meteor. The Champion went away with the merger in 1967. And if Bob Smith's listening to this, I'm being very careful, because I got it backwards on one time, and Bob called me and told me that I got it backwards, and he was
Now,
a
Janet.
fountain. We need to get him on here. He's a fountain of information. But the Champion went away, and it was all about taking snowbirds to Florida. And that's where the Amtrak system, the Silver Meteor, stayed. And it stops in the morning going south, and it stops in the evening going north. And the auto train does not stop; it breezes right through. But we're still in the passenger train business in Jessup, Georgia.
And sometime before 1940s, if I recall, there were over 100 trains coming through a day.
Oh, yes.
And I want to say, I hate to exaggerate, but I think it was a little bit higher than that. So, we were well trafficked because we were down the coastline.
Right. People going north and south to Florida, particularly the snowbirds from New England and up that way, they came this way. They came by train, and that's what the auto train does. The auto train takes their trains with them, takes their cars with them
Yes.
as they go south.
I always thought that'd be kind
And,
of
you,
neat.
and you
so-
know about the split in the track south of Jessup, and then part of it goes to the western part of the state, and
Right.
the other continues straight south. So that was another important
Yes. Yeah, with
D-junction.
the Y. That's a Y.
Yeah.
And it goes straight. It goes through Scriven. It goes to way across to Rice Yard, and then it goes on. And when it takes the curve and goes to the Baldwin Yard, in Baldwin, Florida. It goes through Folkestone and Yulee and those kind of things, but it's going to Baldwin to that yard.
Well, and supposedly, based on what I read in more particulars than I knew at the time, that when the Civil War started, we already had a train down to Macon. And we actually had a train track that went to Thomasville because a lot of people of wealth, there was a spa there. And I want to find out more about that. I say that all the time, but I got to write that down, go look that up. And so that was, taken care of. So after the Civil War, of course, we, what train track that we had, Sherman had another thought about our tracks, and he would tear them up and tie them into what we call Sherman's bow ties.
Right.
So we had to rebuild what we already had before we could start expanding. And so then going from Macon to Brunswick, and the importance of Brunswick was the coast, because in the whole history of railroads, there's a gradual, if you look at the history of the United States, first of all the settlement was near the coast.
Yes.
And then it was to water. And the first railroad in the United States was the Baltimore and Ohio, which connected the Ohio River, and Maryland, where there was not a waterway. So railroads started joining parts of the country where there was no waterway. And so after the coast and the rivers, of course, we had the Altamaha River, and that was really helped with our population and our economic growth. But then once the train came along, the train could go where we did not have waterways. And so connecting to Brunswick and even Darien were the Savannah, Darien, and Brunswick, the three largest ports. Probably on the eastern seaboard, if you threw in Charleston too. I think our ports, maybe New York, but I mean in volume, I'd like to see what that was. So, what else you want to know?
Well, it went down. That's exactly what they were trying to do with the Atlantic and Gulf that became the Savannah, Florida, and Western, that became everything else that it became afterwards, was the fact that they were trying to get to the Gulf of Mexico.
Yeah.
So that they could ship that way
Right.
also. So that was the whole purpose. And that was with the Atlantic and Gulf. They Scriven, how it became Scriven was obviously from the name of the Scriven family, but that was where in 1861, with the beginning of the Civil War, there was a training camp there. There was Camp Harrison, a Civil
Right.
War camp, and they came by train.
Yes. Yeah.
They came by
I read
train
that.
to Scriven, and where the Grace Estate is, where the Graces, where Lindsay Thomas's house is now, that was their mustering area, and they camped there. It was very short lived. They trained and they went on, but there's a place in fact, that's a good segue into a story about the Speedway, but there's a place on the river where it crosses at the Pierce County line that John, my husband's father, fished. It was his favorite fishing hole on the Little Satilla River, and he called it the abutment because that's what it was when the railroad was being built. So he went to the abutment. But the Speedway is a story that's connected also to the Savannah, listen to me. No, don't listen to me. Anyway, the Ghost Light, the Scriven Ghost Light.
Oh, I've seen it.
Is on the place that's known as the Speedway, still in the train world. In March of 1901, the Seaboard and the Flint system had a race. Theodore Roosevelt wanted to make sure that the troops in Havana got their mail in a timely fashion. So they had a train race to see which line could deliver the mail faster to Jacksonville, where it would get on a steamer and go to Cuba. And where the Ghost Light is on Bennett Road, it's called the Speedway because the fastest speed of a train, not meaning to be going fast, was there when 111 miles an hour when it came through there. And that's still called the Speedway by the older engineers on the train, but it's the same crossing as the Ghost Light. So that gives credence to the fact that somebody could have lost their head out there looking
is
for
true.
it with the Ghost Light.
A lot
But
of
the Ghost Light's
superstitions
on
are
there.
built on
Yep.
reality.
So, well, that's reality has been there a long time, and it's all, I have seen it as well. And all the scientific explanations for the ghost light go right out the door when it's floating towards you.
Yep. Especially when you run into your car door to get away from it.
Scriven is a railroad town in spite of Captain Grace. And Captain Grace was a codger. He was just a grumpy old man. And he had 5 children.
Sorry about
he
that,
disowned,
Lindsay.
he disowned 2 of them. One married somebody he didn't like, and the other one was mad about town. I'll just call that. He didn't like that. But his Captain Grace's son, Benjamin Franklin Grace, married Minnie Tweedy, who was from Scotland, and they met in Thomasville at your spa.
I like
It was a
her
winter
name.
retreat for people from Europe came over.
Minnie Tweedy.
And that was Lindsay Grace's parents. And Lindsay Thomas's aunt and uncle were Lindsay and Mary Thomas Grace. So
Okay.
we still got that railroad connection. You know, when we go and do our tours, when we go to Captain Grace's house in Scriven, and I have had the opportunity to go with several of the descendants who have come back and said, well, you know, they want to see where their roots are. And we go, and Lindsay's very gracious, and we go in Captain Grace's house, and I'll have them stand at the front door and look out. And I say, you're seeing what he saw. And that's kind of like you like to do
That's
with
neat.
your Aunt Claudette Noon's
Yeah.
house. You saw what they saw and what they lived. So that's the great thing about history, is that it continues. Courtney gets to go by her great 7 times,
Whatever.
47 times, whatever. She gets to ride by that house, and she knows that she looked out the front door, and that's what she saw.
And my aunt snuck out the window.
Their aunt looked out the window.
My
So
mother learned how to drive. Yep.
that's to me, that's what history is staying connected, and staying grounded.
and one of your favorite expressions is that all history is local.
Yes.
And the other thing I'd like to bring on when we managed to work Garda into this discussion is that when a line is being built, there's a couple of things. And what I read recently was when they started building the Macon, that they started in Brunswick and going north, and there was also a bounty, and then they started from Macon and going south. And there was some kind of bounty, but I don't think that they drove a silver spike. So, but one of the things that, as I've been reading about Gardai, they did not, Gardai itself, it was a community, but it didn't even have a rigid name until the railroad came through in the late 50s. And with that came a school, came a general store, came a post office, and they said that, and a depot of sort, but that Gardai itself was not a stop. It was what's called a flag stop. So if that was happening in Little Gardai, 7 miles south of Jessup, that was undoubtedly happening in other places. And one of the things I've read about, you know, as you have pointed out, because I ask you the same question all the time, the map of Wayne County changed 5 times, and then it said that some of the times that when they changed any of the boundaries of the various counties, it was as either stagecoach and, more importantly, railroad lines they would have to readjust to accommodate the new railroad line or the developing railroad line.
And when you look at the old timetables from the railroads, when you look at the timetables from the Atlantic and Gulf and the Savannah, Florida and Western and the Macon and Brunswick, you see that the names are different because what was Gardai's name before it was Gardai? It had a different... Sallytown. And then Odom was Haslam. And Odom is the same thing. Haslam, and it had another name, but they also developed just like Gardai
Right.
and just like Mount Pleasant and...
Anywhere the train came, things could not help but change.
And it became the center of town. It became the avenue for businesses. The churches grew up around there. They were everything. The trains were holding down everything for growth and becoming important. Odom, I'm
used to
not
have a
sure where
lot.
the original depot was in Odom, but they have one. The depot that's in Odom now, it was a part of the same CDBG that the Heritage Center. Our Heritage Center is a railroad section house.
That's right.
And the section hands, most of them were African American, And when they were out on working to straighten the rails and do repair work on the rails, they had to have somewhere to spend the night. And so they had these little houses all along the way there. And that's where they were called sections, because they worked this section. The railroad was divided up into sections so they could be sure that they covered all of it. And so our Heritage Center was a part of the CDBG that the city of Jessup did, and the depot from Odom somehow ended up with the other stuff at the water treatment plant in Jessup. And the CDBG requirement was that they rehab them and have a adaptive use for these buildings, and they had to put a great deal of thought of moving the depot to Odom, how they were going to get it to Odom because of the size. Now, the Heritage Center is not as large as their depot, and the depot was a depot, but the Heritage Center was a section house, and those section hands, that's what that they're the Gandy dancers. That's what they called the section hands. They sang, and they sang in a rhythm, so they would know when to pull their tools, and everybody would be working cooperatively and coordinated.
Yeah.
And so the Gandy dancers.
I think of a brother.
And they used tools from the Gandy Tool Company. So they called them Gandy dancers.
Okay.
So
Every once in a while, you throw out a new nugget. I mean, Lord of mercy, I got to have a second pen over here. I'm taking so many notes, and I'm not going to understand any of them. But when the other night after I did my little speech on Gardai, I was still thirsty for knowledge, and I went home and started pulling some things, and I found where somebody was quoting Aunt Claude and Aunt Noon, who lived in Gardai, and they were talking about how rowdy. They said that they were only like a mile or so from where the railroad was going through, and how rowdy that the railroad workers were. And then they would go to Aunt Claude and Aunt Noon's to go get some. Of course, WB was probably living there then, but they'd go down there to get some fresh water and things like that. So I think they had some interaction, but that they didn't mind when then they went on a little bit further, and you didn't have all this rowdiness. In fact, I just remembered that I used to collect Coca-Cola bottles, and I was looking for. Jessup used to have a Coca-Cola bottling plant, and I was asking a guy who I knew had collected some. Well, it was James Bland, and he found a whole bunch of Coca-Cola bottles out behind Walmart because the people would be riding the trains and they'd throw them out, when they got through drinking them, with no thought about recycling back then. So, there was all kind of ways that things manifest itself. One of the things that I was bringing to the table, and I'll go ahead and talk about my pedigree. I am the daughter of a railroad engineer, and I love it. I love it. I love the whole mystique of railroads and the building and the placement and even the scandals. I was reading a little bit earlier today that some people, I never heard this before, that some people call the Civil War the Railroad War.
Oh, I haven't heard that
I had
either.
never heard of that, and it was in a pretty respectable place. I can't remember, of course, now what it was, but anyway, there's something sociological. I got to work in all my expertises about when, let's say, when the train first crossed, or the tracks crossed in Jessup. You have to ask yourself. You look at what the population was before. And I've seen census, and I've also seen how many different buildings there were. But after the train comes, well, now you've got an intersection. What do you need? Well, you need food for the workers. You need housing when people started riding the trains, and hotels, and people would come through and spend the night on their way, maybe to Thomasville or on their way to Florida, all the way down to Miami, I guess. And so you needed that. And we had the Altima Hall Hotel, we had the Jessup Hotel, we had the Wilkins, which became the Ingleside, and we had the Wayne Hotel. So for a town that only became incorporated in 1873, we had a little burst. And then they went also on to tell you how many churches there were and how many liquor stores there were. And there were as many liquor stores as there were churches.
I've heard that.
But
it was medicinal.
Yes, yes. So, and at one time,
what ails you?
like 50% of our population in the greatest growth when they were really putting the tracks down was a line to the railroad. You have not only the people who are putting the railroad down, but then when it starts operating, you got to have agents. They even had one guy's job was to go guard the crossing on Cherry Street at night. And I don't know if it was I guess to keep civilians from crossing or looking for trains. But, I guess that was a pretty good job. You had telegraphers, you had baggage masters, we had both passengers and agents. I'm reading now from some of these things I'm seeing. You had engineers, you had watchers, and some of them it would be the father and the son would work for the railroad. And so, again, then came all the people who had jobs because of the hotels. And somebody cut this out of a newspaper article, and it said, and I think it was J.P. Morgan came through and was going to stay at the Ingleside, but he didn't like some of our norms, and so he went ahead and got on the train and went on, I guess, to St. Simon's. And
he went to Jekyll.
Yes.
I did not know he came by train. They had their own train cars, but that makes perfect sense because he would have come by rail from the north.
Well, they wouldn't serve his manservant, to put it bluntly.
Yes.
And I found it pretty cool that he stood up for the guy that was serving him. And he said, well, if you want to serve him, then we'll be gone.
That's not a bulldog point of pride there, is it? But that's the way it was. Sorry to say. Other names that you have affiliated with
somebody
families?
may know about these, as I won't do all of them, but Sidney Bennett, and there were a lot of Bennetts here. He was a railroad yard foreman. And James R. Bland, who was James Bland's daddy, was a railroad telegrapher. Now, he went on and had some kind of store. It seems like a lot of the people who work for the railroad, maybe it's because the railroad went on and their original job, they kind of went on. Don Johnson.
Me.
John Donaldson Jr., who is John
really
Donaldson, the
debonair
coach's uncle. He was an engineer, and a lot of the early homes, and in fact the hotels, were within 2 blocks of the railroad,
Right.
Yes.
going toward Brunswick. And he was Jack Emerson. He was a watcher. John Grubbs was a baggage master. I got railroad people all over the place. My grandfather-in-law's daddy was Edward Majette. He was a clerk.
Okay.
J.W. Murphy, who helped build the Presbyterian Church and the manse, he was a railroad foreman. E.J. Nix, who had been Gay Nix's father, was in the freight department. We had people who served as pumpers. And, here's the cool thing to me. One of the cool things. What is not cool about the railroad? But anyway, so when the train would come and stop here, so lots of people would come out. And a lot of people with farmers, and they'd come out and they had vegetables for them. They had made sandwiches if they wanted to buy them and all. So what a cute little scene to think of, because the train had to stop and refill every how many miles?
I think every 17 miles. It was now the early on when they had steam and were out shoveling coal. I haven't really thought about that, but
I've seen it before, but it
they're
didn't.
like I don't know the difference in regular stops and flag stops on their timetable. So
But we had a big
that.
water
We'll have to
tower.
get back to the listeners on that one
next time. Horace Slover, I know some of you remember Miss Margaret Slover, who was a legend in the educational system. He was a freight agent.
I did not have her.
Huh?
No, she was gone before me. I know you didn't have.
I've heard many stories about Miss Slover and Grammar.
Yeah. And then Theodore Wilkins, Elisha Wilkins, I've already left him out. He worked with the railroad, and Theodore Wilkins had built the Breen's house and sold it to them, and he was with the ACL.
Wilkins was a big big family name with the railroad. And Mr. Elijah, he was married to Miss Shady. They came here from Barber County, Alabama, and she was tiny. He was not a big man either, but she was bossy, and they called him Mr. Shady. And they said that she ruled the roost and did just exactly what Elijah did, just what Miss Shady said to do. And Miss Shady, they lived on the corner of Brunswick and Cherry, and their house is still there. And whenever the school got out, the children were instructed if Miss Shady was on her porch, they had to stop and speak. And they were on their way down to the Strand. They were going to the movie, and so they learned to go down the alley.
That was your people, right?
That was my people. That was our people. That was Mama told me that story. But Miss Shady she did crocheting and tatting, and she had beautiful African violets that she had along the rail of her home. But she was childless, and she was lonely when he was gone with the railroad. So,
well, I'm not going to charge extra for this trivia, but let's see if somebody can debate it. So one thing that I read in 1837, this is again when the railroads are coming south, but they're going to get stopped by the Civil War, said that they went from Tennessee into Atlanta, and Atlanta at the time, the name was Terminus. Mm-hmm. Why didn't y'all tell me that before now?
Oh,
Have you never been to Six Flags over Georgia? You would find that out if you went to Six Flags.
My kids find that out every year in class.
And Marthasville? Marthasville.
Yes.
Was also the name for
Atlanta. Because that was the governor's daughter.
All right.
At the time.
And that might be enough about trains and train history. We might need to take a break now.
Hang on. Let's not think about... So we've had some exciting stuff happen besides Mr. Possibly J.P. Morgan stopping, but let's recall Lady Bird Johnson came to Jessup in the 60s.
Her whistle stop tour.
And
LBJ was
Vanna White.
Vanna White and Pat Sajak came through. I remember that.
I remember.
My mama would not let me go.
Matt Moody got her autograph on a piece of paper that was about 2-inch square. He was so excited. That one's going out for you, Moody.
And then, what was it? Was it the Tropicana one that?
The Tropicana train
that wrecked, and everybody had orange juice.
They couldn't. Yeah.
Yes, I remember that.
They couldn't take it back up.
Somebody said that their mother came running through the house, said everybody grab a bucket, and they went. So they went and got 5 gallons of orange juice, and they said we could not have afforded orange juice, but said
orange juice was a treat. They gave it to you in a little glass.
Yeah,
so
but there was a party going on when that fell.
People had it for days, from what I was told.
We also used to, back in the day of the Barnum and Bailey Ringling Brothers Circus, it came through Jessup on the Martin Luther King Jr. birthday.
My daddy drove the circus train at one time. And wait a minute, I got another family member.
I've got to tell you about the circus train, though. There were no giraffes with their heads out the top of the cars. I was so disappointed waiting on the giraffes to come by. But I used to sit, and we have the train platforms. We have the 3 rail fan platforms, and you can listen to the traffic. And the train master is talking to the conductors. And I would sit and listen and wait to know that the Barnum and Bailey train was coming. I went every year faithfully by the caboose. Anyway.
My daddy's father-in-law, who was C.M. Phillips, he had the stockyard, and he had a little split off there when they would bring cattle in the cattle cars to the stockyard. So,
and that's
what we have today.
That's right here behind us.
The connection.
Stockyard.
No, they moved it.
I'm sorry.
It was originally on Tata Street.
I don't remember all this stuff.
On the curve.
That's what we're here for.
I'm learning too.
Did Donald Bennett have something to do with it?
He was an auctioneer.
He was an auctioneer. Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, we have the Amtraks that come, and we have all the freights that come north and south. If you go across... you have to go across the Omaha River Bridge at Doctortown to go north and south. That's why that was so important and still so important. We also have the Jessup Switcher that comes from Rice Yard and Waycross, and it brings cars that are switching over to Norfolk Southern. And that switcher yard is here. So that switcher comes once a day, usually in the morning, and it's not a very long train. And it's probably come by while we were sitting there sometime, Mel, but I'll make sure to point out that's the switcher. So we are indeed heavily invested in
I always
the railroad.
got excited
with our
about the caboose.
past and present, and I hope our future. So,
Well, now, I just happened to go and talk to, who did I talk to up in Atlanta? The head of Norfolk and something other.
Yes.
I got through an interaction that I got lucky, and I got to go, and the guy who was the head of Norfolk, I went up to him right away and told him that I was a train aficionado, and I came from the city that trains built. And he said that their company is really wanting to reinvigorate freight traffic, and he was talking about versus, moving by trucks. And that, there was the glory day of the movement of freight by railroads, and he hoped that they could regain some of that stature.
I hope they can too, and come right through so we can wave at the people going over there. So that's one of my great things that I like to do in the mornings. If I happen to catch it right, I can go to the porch at the caboose and wave at the people on the Amtrak, and they look at me like I've absolutely lost my mind. But the children, you can see the children, they love to wave. And so it's always
Well,
nice.
let me put in an ad for Amtrak and say that you can get on the train at 6 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock in the evening here, and wake up in Washington, D.C. at 10 a.m., and that is a fabulous trip. And then in a couple of hours, you can be in New York City. And I have carried sons and students and grandchildren on that route, and it's something that more people should try.
Absolutely.
We came back from D.C. one time with the boys. It was an interesting ride.
I loved it. I came from Penn Station in New York, but we only came to Savannah. But we were supposed to fly out, and they closed domestic flights because of weather that was coming. They flew internationals out, and we had to come home. So we actually stayed at the Hotel Penn across the street from Penn Station, and we got on the train at 6 o'clock in the morning. And we got off in Savannah at 9 o'clock that night. But it was the sisters. It was Sally's graduation trip to New York.
Oh,
and
nice.
we came home and it always has bothered me that Sally slept through 4 states. She was not as excited to be on the train as her mother was. And I made sure I waved at everybody at the crossing
Aren't
so I
you
could say,
nice?
I'm on a train and I'm riding and I'm having a wonderful time. Everybody needs to ride a train at least once in their life. It's like climbing a tree. You got to climb a tree. You got to ride a train.
Mama
and we
said-
got to take a break. So we're taking a break at this time. We'll be back to talk about women in history and in Wayne County after I get through stumbling through this part.
The Mad About Wayne podcast from the Wayne County Historical Society in Wayne County, Georgia, is brought to you by ProSonics Audio Engineering. From radio and podcast production to the recovery, restoration, and enhancement of tape recordings, video soundtracks, and phone recordings, to providing live sound services for corporate events, festivals, and houses of worship, ProSonics Audio Engineering is your go-to for all things audio. For more information, call or text 912-297-9911 or email prosonics@icloud.com. ProSonics, the science of sound.
Okay, we're back from break, and we're so pleased to be able to thank Butch Hubbard, Jessup Broadcasting, WIFO, Big Dog Country 105.5 for the use of the studio so that we have this wonderful equipment and this wonderful engineer, and we're ready to go with part 2 of today's broadcast. Look, I went right to radio. Podcast,
I'm so
and we
proud of
have
you.
Courtney Tyre that's going to come in and talk about some people, and starting with whichever number great Mother Whaley is. Georgia Buena Vista, one of my favorite names of all time. And I always make sure that I say it so that people will understand just how beautiful that name is and what a remarkable woman she was. Now we're going to let Courtney talk about the matter at hand.
Now
Well,
that
speaking
we're
of
through it.
names,
Hit it.
Mama's name has something to do with Jean McCann. Jean
Jean
McCann was
okay.
her godmother, I believe.
All right.
And that's where that comes from. Anyhow, okay, so we've been talking about the railroad and Willis Clary. Okay.
I've been working.
There you
on
go.
the rail.
Got our background music going.
Okay, Melba.
It's
Time for Courtney to talk.
And so, Mother Whaley, as she was called by the family, is actually my third great grandmother. I was doing some looking on my Family Tree app. I love Family Tree app.
I can sing "This Girl Is on Fire" for background if
Oh,
you like me
goodness
to.
gracious.
You can, but you get in your car while you're riding home.
But Mother Whaley's family came from Appling County. Her mother was a Hall, and whose father happened to be Seaburn Hall, and so he had a lot of land in Appling County. And Mother Whaley's father went off to fight in the Civil War, and he died within the first couple of months, I guess, in Virginia, fighting at the Battle of Seven Pines. And I've yet to find where he is. He's probably in a mass grave somewhere. But I'm one of those people, I like to find graveyards and find people. I don't know. I just like to find them. And so that's my bucket list thing, is to go back to Virginia and find him.
Or go put up a marker somewhere
But-
like they did to Richard Bennett. He's going to know in the next generation.
But so he passed away, but before he left, he made his best friend, Willis Clary, promise that if something happened to him, that he would marry his wife and take care of his children, which he did. And that's when Willis moved to Jessup with Lucinda and her 3 children, one being Mother Whaley, one being Helen, who died from being thrown from a horse, I believe, and then the other was Joseph Lee, excuse me. And that, if you know Jack or Stanton Lee, that's that line. Anyhow, so Mother Whaley has been here pretty much since she was about 2 years old. They lived in the house on the corner where Harris CPA is now, and I will tell the tale.
Go ahead.
My grandmother is spinning in her grave. But anyhow, so she was about 12 years old, playing in the front yard, and some carpetbaggers had moved to town, as Janet would call them, the Whaleys. And Mr. Whaley and his son, Harry, were riding by on their horses, and he saw her playing in the yard and decided he wanted to marry her. Now, whether or not it was love, I doubt it, seeing that he was a little older for her. I won't tell you how old, but it is the family scandal. Or if it was a business arrangement, I'm not sure. Could be. But they had a long marriage, and she learned a lot from him. When he died in the early 1900s, she inherited or was left everything they had, property, businesses, you name it, she got it, and she ruled the roost from what I was told. She was the first female president of the Farmers and Merchants Bank here in Jessup. She signed the checks. She ran the business. She gave a lot of land for different things here in town. She had land for churches, such as I think Church of God was one of them, First Methodist, I think First Baptist, the Park,
Cracker Williams.
Cracker Williams. She was just big time in philanthropy. I also found out at our latest historical society meeting that the ladies of what is it, the Jessup, the ladies of Jessup,
Yes,
of the city of Jessup. Apparently, Troy said that she was pretty much the leader, and they helped.
I'm sure she was.
And they helped. I won't tell you why, but they helped get a man's headstone built in the city cemetery. But she is my person. She is the one that I would love to have dinner with if I could have dinner with anybody alive or dead. She is it. She is my third great grandmother, and she supposedly had been in different areas of the country before it was areas of the country, from what I understand. I think she went to one of the International Cotton Expos up in Atlanta, because I've seen a letter that mentioned something about a cotton exposition, and we're studying that right now in my class, about Henry Grady and the Cotton Expos and how they got all the industry down to Georgia. And she was very involved in a lot of industry. She wanted to get business going, and she wanted it to be successful. She helped people in that area. She helped Anna E. Hall, who we talked about last month. She was a African American missionary here from, well, not from Wayne County, but she had family in Wayne County, and she stayed here for a while. And she helped her get her education so that she could be a successful missionary with the Methodist Church. And we still have our business today. It's the really big building with the bright tin roof. I can't stand that tin roof, but I understand. Downtown, it's got David's and Dr. Major's office and that whole strip.
It's a Whaley Center.
It's called the Whaley Center, yes, and I have actually started a home Facebook page after about 4 years of having something going on, trying to get a website. I'm slowly but surely coming into technology, I guess you'd say. I'm sure if she was alive, she'd tell me that I'm really slow at what I do, but hey, everybody at their own pace. She and Mr. Whaley only had one child when she was about 18. That was Maud Lee Whaley, and she actually married Elisha Graham, whose family, that's what Graham, Georgia's named for. And they in turn had a few children, which happened to be Georgia Lee Graham, and that would be my great-grandmother, going down to Martha Lee. If anybody knows Martha Lee, she was a character. And then my mom, and then me. So, and now we have Porter.
Martha Lee's last name was?
Martha Lee's last name was Gibbs, because she married Warner Gibbs, whose mother, this is where the ties all come into play, the who you know and who you're related to. His mother was actually the first Congresswoman of Georgia, Florence Revel Gibbs. She was actually from Thompson, moved to Folkestone, and that's where her husband saw her on the train. He was going through Folkestone, and she was walking on the depot platform, and he was from Clinch County, Ben Gibbs, and he was looking for a place to start his law practice, and he saw her walking by and told the guy he was on the train with, that's going to be the woman I marry. And he got off, and they courted for a little while. And sure enough, they got married, moved here to Jessup, had 2 children, Betty, who would become Betty Leapart, and Warner, my grandfather. And they lived in the house downtown diagonally across from the tennis or pickleball courts here in Jessup. And I can't help it. The fact that I have 2 strong women in my family, you can't help but have a little bit of pride.
Absolutely.
Mother Whaley, I think, from what I understand, Mother Whaley was born in 1861 and lived till 1956, I believe. And Mama even remembers Mother Whaley. She go back into St. Simon's. She and her daughter had a house over there. It's now a parking lot, but it was across the road from the Majette's house, behind the Methodist Church right there. And family would come there. She would go back into that, and they both loved the island. And I don't know if this is true, but one of the whoppers I've heard from a family member was that I guess it was the big storm, the Big Sea Island storm, that they were over there, and she swam. Now, notice I said she swam from St. Simon's to Brunswick for help on some matter. I'm not sure what. Now, whether or not that's true, I don't know. And I'm not going to tell you who told me that, because they seem to come up with some whoppers, but hey, I don't know. I haven't read anything in letters or anything about it yet, but she was a wonderful woman. When she was older, there was a man named Mr. Harper. I don't remember his first name. We were trying to find that out because Mama wants to know if his family still exists. But he would come and pick up Mother Whaley, and Troy Nichols remembers him, can tell you what he looked like, what car he drove. Can't remember his first name, but that's okay. He said, well, I just knew him as Mr. Nichols. And they would do Sunday drives, kind of like, I guess, their elderly way of courting. But they never married. There was no, they'd sit on the porch and have tea. And Mama remembers when she passed away that Mama said she can remember looking. They had her at the house, and the Neesmiths did the wake and the funeral, and they were across the street downtown, and she can remember trying to peek through the door to see what they were doing to her because Mama had that weird curiosity. You know, what do you do with dead bodies?
Is that where you got it?
I
from
guess
your
that's
mother?
where I got it. I know, Mama.
Doesn't sound very Tyrish, does it?
No, it sounds more like a Gibbs thing or a Williamson thing, I guess. But you know, Mama's a retired nurse, so she liked blood and gore and everything else. But Meemaw's the one. Martha Lee's the one that wrote her obituary, and to read it, you would think that Mother Whaley was a dignitary. It talks about the carriage that pulled her through and the people that showed up, and even said that she was. Now, I don't know that this is true because my grandmother had an interesting way of kind of exaggerating the truth. I'm still trying to prove it. She said that Mother Whaley's father was first cousins to Robert E. Lee, and that's in the obituary. Now, whether or not that's true, I don't think so. But hey, who's going to doubt Martha Lee?
Well, there's an old saying that says, when the legend becomes fact, you print the legend.
There you go.
So nobody's here to challenge it.
No. But going back to Florence, I know I've jumped from side to side, but I can't help myself. Florence, actually, what had happened was Ben was in office up in D.C., and he had a stroke. And old Dr. Pompelli, not the one now, but his father, who brought me into this world, and my grandfather got on the train going to D.C. to go get Ben and try to get him back. But, of course, he passed away before they could get him back. And so they came to, I think it was the governor of Georgia at the time, and I can't remember who it was, but came to Mom Gibbs and said that they would like for her to take his place as Congresswoman. And she said only if she were elected by the people. And so they held a special election, and sure enough, she was elected. Of course, she ran unopposed, and only 23% of the voters turned out.
That's a high percentage
But what year
anymore.
was that?
works.
What year was that?
That was 30, I want to say 38 or 39.
And women had not been voting but for 18 years. And I
Right.
bet there was a lot of people who still would have been anti a woman having office. So her popularity speaks
Right.
for itself.
Right. And Mom said that she was kind of a quiet woman when it came to politics and things like that. And we've got a picture of her, you know, up in D.C. She lived on DuPont Circle and had Alvin. There's a picture of Alvin when he was a toddler sitting on the desk with her. And she served out her term, and she decided it wasn't for her. She did not want to be reelected. And so that's when she came home here. And she helped take care of the Lee Park children, and my mom and them lived across the street in the little, I guess it was known as the Birdhouse now, maybe. It's painted white and black now.
It's on South Wayne Street.
Right across the street.
But see, I want to know how she was received by her male colleagues.
Probably well, because she would have scolded them nicely.
I would think so. Having to raise the Lee Park children, I would think she was well versed in how to scold people. But
you need to share that picture of Alvin on her desk. I'd like to see that.
okay, I've got a copy of it. Might actually be in. I don't know. It probably
No, I
isn't
don't
in
think
that
it
No,
is.
it's not.
But yeah, and they kept the whole little family lived right there. The Gibbses had built, or not built, but they lived in that what's now the O'Quinn house, and
The
then
Ellis Gibbs house.
right, and apparently there was a stable behind there because Ben had horses, according
There
to
was
Mama.
a stable on Plum that would have Mr. Aaron's stable, which would have been back in there.
Okay.
So, yes.
And then when Ben died, and Betty and Doc moved in with her, or maybe I'm not sure. Anyway, they ended up living in the house, and Mom Gibbs moved to the house behind what is the Carter house, which is Amy's house now. The big,
Yeah, the Carter house.
yeah, the Carter house.
National Registry
There
home.
you go. And so then Betty and Doc and the kids lived in that house, which is the house. I remember it being Alvin's house before he lost it. And
What happened?
and Mom lived across. Mama and her sister and her parents lived across the house in the Birdhouse, and next to the Prices. Is that right?
The Price is Kelly and Natasha's house.
Okay.
Next to the Effie Murphy house.
Yeah, but who
The
was
Harrises.
who was after that? The lady that lived uptown.
Dr. Bennett's family lived in that house.
And who was the lady that stayed upstairs?
That was Miss Harris.
And what was her first name?
Ursel?
Ursel. That's right. Mama talked about how she loved Ursel. She said she had a great sense of humor. But then Mom and them moved later on to Magnolia Street over there across from where your husband lived, Melba.
Right.
And that's how Mama ended up babysitting the entire Murphy clan.
Did she get paid double time?
She got paid enough to take them to the Strand.
Good.
She said she would march them through town and they would go to the movie and then they would go
Five
back.
Little Murphys
There
and
you go.
how they grew.
That's wonderful.
But yeah, so it's, I don't know, the women in my family, I love them dearly. And my daddy's side, they were more reserved people, but hardworking reserved people. But yeah, as far as making a difference, I think Florence and Georgia are the two for us. But then, of course, our place was down, not ours, but right down the road from the Gibbs house was the Donaldson house, and that's John Donaldson's grandfather.
The Florence Breen house.
Okay. And then he was married to Ann Kappelman, who actually is responsible for those that don't know, and I just learned probably about 5 or so years ago, is responsible for the Georgia G.
Ann Donaldson, yes.
Ann Donaldson, yes.
And she just passed away recently,
did,
and Lauren Smith wrote
this
a
week.
tribute to her.
Yes.
What you got, Lauren? How many times did Larry Munson say, "What you got, Lauren"?
But Ann was
A little Go Dogs moment.
She was really neat. I liked Ann. Her sister
She
Sally was one of Mama's best friends growing up, and I loved their mama, Sarah. She was a hoot. I love that one. She was funny to me. She was probably in her 80s and still had a great sense of humor. And I thought, who is this woman? And Mama's like, this is Ann and Sally's mom. And I was like, oh my God, Miss Kappelman. I was like, she's like, girl, don't call me Miss Kappelman. Okay.
And she was the first teacher of the program.
The gifted program.
The gifted program.
The gifted
Yes.
program. And just
And she called
really,
it a spectrum.
right, she really won a lot of acclaim, as she should have, and students today still talk about her. She was just such a broad thinker in terms of art, especially. There had not seemed to be somebody who really promoted the people who had an artistic view of the world.
Right.
They might later become a lawyer or something, but they really had a latent talent, and she brought it out in a lot of people. And
Mama said when they would go over to visit, she and Sally would go visit Ann and John, that in the kitchen above the cabinets, and I didn't know this because I had never been in there, but above the cabinets, Ann had painted like a mural of downtown Jessup, and it had the buildings. And I know, and I'm sitting here thinking, oh my gosh. And she said, and I know somebody's painted over that. I know by now. But Mama said it was just this mural that ran across the top of the cabinets. And she would sit there in the kitchen and they would talk and she'd just stare at it and look at the different buildings. And there'd be like, she'd have Sally playing. And it was just, she was very talented.
I've been I did not see it. I was in there. I don't know that I went in the kitchen though. I was in their house, 2 or 3 times when we were working on history stuff. And we used her home in the architectural survey when I taught it, but I don't remember that part of it, so I'm very sorry about that.
The story goes for the G, though, is that John was coaching with Vince Dooley, and Vince said, here, Coach, we need a logo. And so he took the helmet home and gave it to the right person. Yeah,
That's
and
what
she
Lauren
did
Smith's
it.
story is. And I think, I don't know where I saw it. Maybe it's in the Press Sentinel.
I'm not
There's
sure.
a shout out to the Press Sentinel.
They did WTOC did a news broadcast about it. That's how I learned. But anyhow, I thought that was a cool little dig with Ann. And then one of my grandmother's good friends, who I remember quite well, was Madge McCann Sewell Bellinger. She lived in the large house on Cherry Street. A lot of people went to her kindergarten. I don't know. Did any of your kids ever go or?
No, that was before I moved here from Waycross, but a lot of my peers went and, just really loved it.
And she worked for the newspaper. She wrote the book Wind Song for the Methodist
Church, history
Yes.
of the Methodist Church.
She was on Wayne Beautification and is also responsible for us having the Red Caboose downtown.
That's why it's named Madge's Place, because she was the ringleader of that.
And Madge was quite a character. She was the one that I've always felt it was kind of interesting how she and my grandmother and some other of the ladies were responsible for having Aria and David's engagement party, and then years later, Aria and David end up buying the house. But she talked about her house being haunted. That her first husband Art would come see her, and I don't remember Art. All I remember was Madge and her dog, Houston. That was the name of her dog. He was a little terrier, and she would talk about how Art would come see her. And she started seeing her second husband, Ken. I do remember Ken. And
Bellinger.
Yes, Bellinger. And he was from up north, I believe. And when he had wanted to marry her, she just said she didn't know if she could do it. She didn't know if she could do it. She had to talk to Art. And she talked to Art. And Art said that he thought that Ken was a good match and he loved her and he'd take care of her. And that Art said he loved her and he wouldn't be coming anymore. That she'd be taken care of, and that was the last time she saw him.
There's another legend.
I know, right?
The story from the current
did you mention
owner.
who her parents were?
Her parents were
McCann.
XY and Madge McCann.
Who were responsible for?
The Dr. Town Sawmill. They came here in 1924. But the current owner of the house has issues with things being moved and things that go bump in the night and that kind of thing. And so whenever we get to get our trolley and do our ghost tour, we're going to pull into the circular drive in front of the McCann house and we're going to talk to Ken, another Ken.
Another Ken, yes.
So,
Yes,
and Madge, with the beautification committee, was quite a group of mostly women, a lot of good people that...
Was she in on the creation of the library, or was that Georgia?
That was Mother Whaley.
That was that was Mother Whaley.
Mother Whaley gave the land
Yes.
for that. And the interesting thing about First Methodist, is that she bought the land from James R. Jessup.
Oh, that's right. See, you know more about
He
deeds
owned
and land
he
than
owned
I do.
several lots around town. He owned the lot that the courthouse is on. And he had, my mother and Stetson Bennett Jr. did the research on that. And when we did the sesquicentennial for the city of Jessup, we had a trial. And Wendy Dolan and the group from that Wayne County High School
Mock trial?
Yes.
mock trial, and they presented evidence about each one, the Morris K. Jessup, Thomas Sidney Jessup, and James R. Jessup. And based on the evidence that was presented, they said James R. Jessup is the namesake.
I agree with that.
But people who don't know our railroad history want to give it to somebody else. So anyway, what other names we got, ladies, that have to do with Women's History Month?
We've got our first mayor of Jessup, which I didn't know her.
Female
mayor, excuse me, not mayor. That was my people too. Sorry, I don't mean to brag. But the first female was Mary Barton Hitt, and the only reason I knew that was because I went to visit Air in Athens one day, and we went to go get our hair cut, and the girl that cut my hair asked me where I was from, and I said Jessup, and she says, my aunt was the first female mayor of Jessup. And I said, really? And she told me, and I was like, I've never heard that name, but okay. I think it was a little before my time.
It was a little before your time. It was during my time. And Bill Hitt was my age.
Oh, okay.
He was my doctor.
And the daddy,
Yes.
Bill, this is Bill Jr., that was.
And she was active in politics throughout the state of Georgia and had helped campaign for Jimmy Carter. But she was, well respected in the area.
She came for the mayor get-together during the sesquicentennial.
Yes.
She was able to come
Yes.
I saw
for
her
that.
picture.
Who else you got for Women's History Month? We talked about Georgia Cogdell in February.
That's right.
Prominent
Yes.
black educator from a very educated-minded family. And we have Martha Ross Smith, who was also, and she was pretty important in integration.
Yes.
She went between the two schools with ease, and we all respected her. I played on her first integrated softball team with the Wayne County or Jessup Rec Department. I don't know what it was.
And you know, the thing is, it might not be like a mayor or a woman who sat on the banks, but I think something should be said for the women in leadership in the school system, because a lot of the times, this is women who were forthright and had leadership skills, but might not could have gone over into the old boys club. They became. You go back and you look at our principals and people who've had major. Yeah, but you know, I go back to Miss Spence. You know, there's a lot of women who've made a big difference in education, and especially when you went through the 60s and 70s when there were so many changes in the requirements for teachers, and you know, so many laws about things that they went in there and were quite.
That's what our family, one of the daddy's side, the Bessie Sarncy.
Right. And Miss Puckett.
Martha Puckett. Mama remembered them from church at First Methodist. She and her children. Quite a few, I think.
Yes, and her house is still standing on the highway in between Jessup and 203, or Jessup and Scriven. And she was an author also. She wrote Snow White Sands. And she also wrote, there's another book she wrote, and I can't remember, but she was very important in 4-H.
Well, Carson McCullers lived here for a while, who went on to write
A Member of the Wedding.
Yes.
Carson McCullers is one of my favorites. She's from Columbus originally, but she married Reeves McCullers, who's tied into the Lee family, I believe.
And she was tied into the Murphy family.
Okay. Someone just learned all kinds
she
of
was
stuff.
the first. There was a gentleman who was working on a documentary. Edna Ruth did a program with the Historical Society one year on Carson McCullers, and I think she lived here when she was writing A Member of the Wedding. But she was married to Reeves McCullers.
I think her house
was tied into Geneva's family somehow. Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
but I'm not sure.
You know, we tend to think of people who, Miss Hitt wasn't born in Wayne County, but we certainly are going to claim her. But you look at Claire Hicks. Now, you talk about somebody who was groundbreaking in the way that she started taking some of the fear and all out of AIDS, and you know, she was just I think just incredible.
Then you had people just simply like Martha Jean Burns, who was tied into the Milliken family.
Yes.
And the Millikens also started the Episcopal Church in Jessup. And they also had a turpentine still in Gardi.
Yes, and he lived there for a while. I know.
And Captain
Martha
Ben
Jean.
Milliken, he came here from Abilene County after the Civil War. And so this is that. I can't remember. She started the Milliken School for Girls.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yes.
That's right.
Can't say enough about that.
They like you said, they didn't get involved in politics, and they weren't up at City Hall addressing the commissioners or anything. But they did cut their own path and did their own thing that made a difference for a lot of people.
My great grandmother, Parmelia Eliza Merritt Street, she came here and became a widow, and she amassed a lot of land in Gardi. And, you know, I think there's so many people that when you're studying the history of or the contributions of a lot of people, and not to take away anything from the things that the men have accomplished, but, you know, behind every great man is a woman saying, we could do this better.
That is true in my book.
But anyway, I think of all the strong personalities who supported their husbands, and
Well, you were talking about people that come to this town to live. Farron Cruz is a wonderful person that I know. She said she used to come talk to our kids. I cannot talk. She would came and talk to our class when I was little because Janice Richardson had her come talk to us at Just Elementary in the Media Center, and she would start her story about the Native Americans and would talk about many, many moons ago. And she is a real Cherokee princess that has starred, and her picture is in the Cherokee or Unto These Hills Museum up in Tennessee. And she is a well-known Native American artist throughout that area and here, as a matter of fact. And she's now retired with her husband, who she calls Bear. That would be Mr. Dennis. And they live at the coast now, but they lived here for a while. And she was real big into tennis. And she and I claim her and Bev for getting me into wanting to play tennis. And she's a great person. I see her at the coast all the time. She never forgets a face, and she'll come up and hug you. And Miss Georgia Bulldogged out and all of her red and black.
She was Miss University of Georgia.
University of Georgia. That's right.
We should all wear more red and black.
I agree.
And soon we will be able to wear gold and white with pride. I'm hoping that we will see that.
Well, now, you know what? Roz, my husband's great-grandmother, was the first or second woman lawyer, Vera Majette, in Georgia. And she started painting, I think, in her 70s, and had just amassed quite a collection, and a lot of that is on display down in St. Simon's now. But they lived in Wayne County, and she wrote a novel that was quite scandalous at the time because it was about an interracial relationship, and it's in the University of Georgia Special Collections.
Oh, nice.
It's very hard to find a copy of it.
And let's not forget Miss Malvia Tootle, who is responsible for most of the known history of Wayne County now.
This is true. Amen.
And hopefully Janet continues.
She liked
for a
dead
while.
people better than living. She said they were easier to get along with. And
Amen.
I agree with that, too.
genealogy was her thing. And she liked working with family trees. She did it all our lives. That's how I got into it, was driving Malvia around and driving Miss Wedding-Camp around and driving Miss Jordan around, and kind of fell into it that way. So that's her. Most of her work is in the special collections room. I have her hard drive, and she learned how to use a computer, and she never learned Excel. She did everything in Word, and she had a unique naming system for her files. And that made perfect sense to her, but I have to, generally, when I look for something on Mama's hard drive, I have to open it to see what in the world it is, because she had a code. She had her own little code for how she named things. But she worked at the bank. She worked at American National Bank, and so she talked about people that she knew. And she knew about Harry Bennett did my mother's eulogy, and it's one of the favorite things that anybody has ever said about Mama. He said, there are a lot of people in heaven nervous now that Malvia has arrived, because she knew the down and dirty on people and their banking. So I appreciate her mention.
Well, also people would, I'll keep it vague and obtuse, but people would come to town if they had any questions to ask about anybody, such as the time somebody came to town looking for their real father. Somebody would send them to her, and she usually knew the answer.
Yes.
But she was discreet.
Oh, indeed. Yeah, they think I know what she knew, and I can promise you I do not. I know a lot. I know I'm more of a place, not so much people, but I can do the history. But Mama, like I said, she was the teller. You know, she knew people by their account numbers. We'd be riding down the street and she'd say, "Oh, there's 0520919910." And for years after she retired, people would call her at home and say, "What do I do with this?" And she would tell them. Her neighbor, her bank statement didn't look right to her, and she went next door to Mama, and they got on the phone with accounting and bookkeeping or whatever they called that in the back, and they figured it out. So
I just had a thought, and that was Jan Bennett, who is
Oh, yes,
responsible
Miss Jan.
for our swim program in
David
Wayne
Larson.
County. Yeah, well, he was a result of it,
Right.
but they gave up their. She and Dr. Bennett, they provided their pool for forever to let
remember
all the
that pool.
swim team practice
Practice.
there, and they were just very big proponents.
And many children learned how to swim or did not learn how to swim.
We had strong. They
That
called
pole.
them steel magnolias. The Southern woman was steel magnolias because they had to be. So many
Right.
men didn't come home from the war. The women had to step up, and we didn't step back down when the man repopulated. We got some pretty strong women still running loose in the county. I think
Yeah,
we're
how you going to
good.
keep them down on the farm after
That's
they've
exactly
been
right.
making
That's exactly
decisions?
right. So, anyway, I think we're good.
Well, no,
you
let me
got one more
add
thing?
about my great-grandmother, Lavinia Street, who in the 1860s or 70s remarked that she wasn't born to be ruled. And I think that maybe has a nice way to...
I like to. I use this saying, and it goes along with that, but it's because my housekeeping is subpar. I wasn't raised to be a domestic. I was raised to be an intellectual,
There you go.
and that's what I like to use. But
See,
my
that's
mother's
what's wrong with
house
me.
was clean. So, all righty, we closing out now. We've
Hallelujah.
had a
I
good
think
session. I
we
think we had a
I'm
great
so
time.
glad we had this time together.
She just wants to sing. She's in the radio station and she wants to sing. So, all right, Courtney, take us home.
Well, thank you for joining us tonight with Mad About Wayne, our fifth episode, excuse me, I was corrected, on the railroad and women's history. And we do appreciate everybody, including Butch Hubbard and WIFO again. Thank you, Miss Melba Murphy, for coming and speaking. And myself, thank you, Courtney, thank you. And Janet as well. We hope to see you soon, and listen out for our next episode.
And join us at the Historical Society.
We'll be
Amen.
there.
Oh, and
Second Thursday.
We've got all kinds of stuff too for that. Don't forget, we've got our new
T-shirts.
We've got T-shirts, and we've got social media, and we're coming up in the modern days as well.
You don't
So
want me
do
to-
check us out on Facebook.
You want me to sing Moving On Up?
Oh,
No, please
Lord,
don't.
no.
Cut us
Leave
off
that to
there,
the
sir.
Jeffersons.
I'm getting no respect.
We hope you enjoyed today's Mad About Wayne podcast. For more information on the Wayne County, Georgia Historical Society, please visit our Facebook page. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast so you receive notifications when a new episode is released. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you again soon. Remember, we're mad about Wayne.